Hello everyone. Welcome to our next knowledge clip about the introduction for your writing assignment for economics of taxation. So let's go ahead and get started with some general information about your introduction. So for your introduction, I would recommend, again, just as I mentioned in the approaching the paper, around 200 to 400 words. I think closer to 400 is a bit more realistic in terms of capturing everything that you need to in the introduction. And it's also fine, of course, if you go a little bit over that. Again, it's overall the word count needs to be around 2K, and that's just the primary focus. So the main purpose of the introduction is to, as the title says, introduce your topic or the goal of the essay. This is where you want to essentially present your central or research question, and that is essentially the most critical element of your introduction, and that is where you are discussing or establishing what is your research question regarding the OECD pillars 1 and or 2, and how does that have an implication on the multinational enterprises or corporations in general. And the main purpose, again, is to really make your reader understand what your focus is of your introduction, what is the focus and purpose of your entire paper. So just to give a quick assignment recap, we essentially are focusing on the OECD Pillar 1 and 2 initiatives. These were implemented a couple of years ago. So you essentially want to, have a closer look at this and essentially evaluate the Pillar 1 and 2 in terms of either success, implementation, so on and so forth. It's really kind of up to you based on your own look into the literature, and of course your own focus on either Pillar 1 or Pillar 2 or both is also fine. So that essentially is the main focus, and kind of looking at those conclusions or what conclusions can be drawn based on the results so far of these initiatives being implemented. So one thing that is really important to note about the introduction is that it should be very objective, meaning that you should present facts and limit opinion statements. This is a common trend throughout your entire paper. Again, this is supposed to be very, very literature-based discussion. So you want to make sure that anything that you note is not in an opinion, but rather a empirically backed statement. So in your introduction, you have 4 main components as your structure, and that is essentially organized by your rationale, which is a combination of background and problem identification. You have your central question, your research method, and the structure of the paper. So firstly, of course, we start with our rationale, and that is essentially setting the scene with the background and context, and then as well the problem identification. So regarding the background, I would recommend, again, just creating some context, setting the scene for your pillars, and noting the kind of current state of affairs or something that has been going on and that has been the norm. So for example, what has been something new regarding taxation of these large corporations? Has there been maybe a new debate regarding this? Has there been an evaluation of the pillars? Those kinds of things. So something a bit more recent. Or you can also have a look at what has these MNEs been consistently doing with taxes for a long time, and that is currently the norm and still continuing to be an issue. And that's where you can lead into your problem identification. So you want to elaborate on the impacts of these sort of tax strategies on society. So why is this an important thing to discuss? Is this a new issue or problem, or has this been ongoing since a certain moment in time? How big of an issue is it? Is it for the revenues of countries, small businesses, competition, etc.? So to what extent this is actually a big issue. And who and what is affected by, for example, the lack of coordination, by the advantages that, a lack of coordination has for these corporations, and so on. So it's really important you can link these kind of two things together, but again, it's just establishing that relevance for your paper. Based on what the course outline said, they also recommend to use a newspaper article, so that can kind of be either something that revolves around the background setting or the problem identification. And that's where we get into our central question. So once you've sort of established a little bit of the context, you can now lead into your primary question. So you want to link your central question or research question to the issue that you introduced in part 1B or in the general rationale. So the rationale section and part 2 of this central question part, they really go hand in hand, because you can sort of segue from what is the issue to what are you now going to look into regarding this issue. So you want to, of course, look into the pillars 1 and or 2, and you want to establish the extent to which these are sufficient or not under some sort of metrics that you yourself decide on. So some general tips about the central question is that it should be neutral, unbiased, have a defined scope, and not be too broad. So if you just ask, to what extent is Pillar 1 initiative effective, that's going to take you a lot more than 2,000 words. So be a bit more specific. Note if it's how you want to evaluate the pillar, if you want to focus on a particular group of countries, if you want to focus on Europe, if you want to focus on a certain time period, so on and so forth. There's a lot of ways you can really narrow the scope of your central question. You also want to make sure that everything in your central question is clear and well defined, so that it's extremely clear to the reader what exactly you are asking in your research question. And lastly, recommendation is that it's not a yes or no question, but rather an open question that you can actually go ahead and explore a bit in your paper. So it should not just be, is this initiative successful, yes or no? That's not going to be a really good research question, but rather asking to what is the extent to which this pillar is helpful or useful for society. That's how you can formulate your research question to have a little bit more of an open, ended answer. So as I mentioned, you then also have a research method section and a structure of a paper. In terms of the research method, you really shouldn't spend too much time on it because, it's simply just establishing how you're going to address and justify your research question. And of course, we're doing a literature review. So there's no study being done that we ourselves have to conduct. So it's just simply a review of past literature. Should not take you more than a sentence or even half a sentence to establish this. And that's where you can kind of segue into your structure of the paper. So what is the sequence your paper will follow? And that is something that is simply given to you in your course outline. So you want to have this introduction, theoretical framework / background, and then the conclusion section. And I would just recommend establishing maybe in like a sentence or two what each section will contain and how does it, again, contribute to answering and addressing your research question. It's important that you, again, really drill this in on how will these sections or how will the overall paper try to answer your research question. So that's really the primary goal, and that's the primary focus of your introduction there. So that is basically going to be it for this knowledge clip. So thank you again so much for watching. As always, as I mentioned last time, make sure to check with your tutorial tutor's requirements if they have different preferences for word count, progression of the introduction, and so on. Obviously listen to them. This is more supposed to be a guide for you if you're still a little bit stuck. There will be another video soon about the theoretical framework, so focusing a little bit on that. And if you do need a little bit of help or you're a bit worried about your exam passing rather than your paper, then you can check out the links in the description and you can see, for both BA and EBE students, you have some courses that can help you with your individual track. So that's going to be basically it for today. So thank you so much for your time, and I will see you in the next clip.